If you've ever lived in the countryside, you'll know that farmland at night is unlike anywhere else. It's not just quiet, it's a silence so deep, it almost presses on your ears. The houses are far apart, the fields stretch endlessly, and when the sun goes down, the isolation becomes terrifyingly real. In Iowa, in Arkansas, in the farmlands of America, strange things happen when the cornfields start to whisper. These are some of the stories that still haunt the farmers who lived through them. I own a farm in Buckingham, Iowa, where we mainly grow corn. This was in August of 2018, on a slightly rainy night. Cheryl and I have both spent our entire lives in the farm life. It's really all we know. Of course, farm life in Iowa means lots of space and very few people. Our closest neighbors, George and Kenny, were each about half a mile away in opposite directions. Also farmers with not much else going on around here. It's easy to become friends with your neighbors. We often have George and Kenny and their wives over, and vice versa. On this one otherwise normal weekend night, we had George and his wife over for drinks. We all got pretty drunk while playing board games. They left around 11. Luckily, it's a 30-second straight line drive home. We continued to drink some wine as we watched one of our favorite movies. We were starting to get tired. We were definitely feeling the effects of the wine. We were most likely just gonna fall asleep on the couch, cuddled up together, when there was a knock at the front door. A knock at the door at this hour was unusual. In fact, it never happened before. But accompanied with the knocks, we thought we could hear a voice say something. I lowered the volume of the TV. We waited, and about 20 seconds later, another set of knocks at the door, followed by a muffled voice saying, "We need help." I was about to get up and open the door when Cheryl shook my arm. I looked at her, and she made a face and shook her head. "No." I whispered, "I'm just going to ask who it is." She replied, "I shouldn't let them know we're home, but odds are they already knew." I went over to the door and asked, "Who is it?" The voice on the other side said, "Oh, thank God. Can you open up? We're lost." I said, "Who's we?" The voice said, "My wife and I." I replied, "Can your wife say something?" There was silence for a few seconds. I followed it up with, "Did you hear me?" The same voice said back, "Yeah, but she's not next to me right now." Red flags started going off in my head. The voice sounded a little off, like a man trying to make his voice sound a little higher. I laughed and said, "George, is that you?" George is a big goof, and him being drunk, it wouldn't be unheard of for him to do something like this. The voice said back, "Yeah," in a slightly deeper voice now. I almost felt relief, believing that it was actually George, but I didn't want to open the door just yet. Having someone knock on your door out here late at night claiming to be lost doesn't happen. It's not a thing and is an immediate cause for alarm. I said through the door, "Prove it." "What's your wife's name?" A now unfamiliar voice said back, "That's a trick question." My smile disappeared. I went to get my phone and call George. Cheryl was watching the whole thing, telling me we should call the police. I said, "Hold on." The phone rang like 3 times before George picked up. I said, "Are you at my front door right now?" And he said, "No." I told him there's someone at our front door trying to trick me into opening it. He said he'd hurry right over, and we hung up. Keep in mind, all of us were still drunk during this. There were knocks again at the door. I yelled, "I have a shotgun waiting for you if you don't leave here now." The voice said back, "We're just trying to use a phone. That's all we need." Cheryl called 911, which out here takes an extremely long time for an officer to arrive on scene. We heard footsteps walking around our wooden deck that wraps around the house. A couple sets of footsteps, actually. They stopped at one of our windows, which had the blinds closed, and we heard one of them attempting to lift the window open. This caused Cheryl, still on the phone with 911, to scream, "Leave us alone!" I followed suit and screamed at the top of my lungs, "Get the mondo you out of here or I'll shoot you." It took me that long to think to run upstairs to grab my shotgun from the closet. Literally a few seconds later, there were more pounds at the door, and this time it was actually George's voice yelling, "Open up!" I let George in, who also brought his shotgun. He said he didn't see anything or anyone as he pulled up. He stayed with us until a police officer came to the house. The officer did a quick little scan of the property with us and then left. We took his advice and installed a camera on the front and back. a precaution we had never thought of until this incident. Still gives me chills that all that was keeping out whoever was on our front deck that night was a wooden door. This story takes place at my grandparents' farm in the summer of 2018. I was alone one night since my grandparents were away. I was getting paid to watch the farm for a couple nights. On the last night, I was watching TV in the living room when I started to hear a strange noise coming from outside in the cornfield. At first, I shrugged it off, figuring it was most likely a deer. That was until I heard all the cows start mooing at the same time. Usually you hear maybe one cow at a time, but when every single cow starts mooing, something is wrong. Something or someone would have to startle them to make all the cows freak out like that. I was the only one at the farm, so it was my job to see what was going on. I went to the closet to get a coat and go outside, but just as I was about to step out, I heard a very high-pitched cow scream. I stood still for a while, shaking in my boots. Something terribly wrong was going on with the cows. I quickly ran upstairs to my grandpa's room. Under his bed, he always keeps a few guns. I loaded his hunting rifle and went outside. The cows still would not stop mooing, so I went into the barn to check. There was nothing out of the ordinary. All the cows were still there, until I walked further down and noticed that one cow was missing from its stall. It didn't make sense. I was sure he was tied up the last time I saw him. Then I thought I could hear a cow make a high-pitched moose sound in the cornfield outside the barn. I went outside, but while walking to the field, I swear I heard what sounded like people talking. I finally had enough. I fired 2 rounds into the air. Everything went silent. The cows were quiet, and I couldn't hear anything from the field. That was until I heard footsteps in the field. I didn't know if I had the courage to go inside the cornfield, but I had to do it anyway. This is the exact reason farmers have guns. I couldn't just hide inside the house with trespassers in the field. I started to walk into the crops and heard many pairs of footsteps beside me. I was getting even more freaked out as I continued deeper into the field. Then I froze. Down one of the rows of corn, there was a person in all black standing a few feet away from me. I raised my gun, telling him to get out of my field. I wasn't bluffing. I was ready to shoot, but he never moved. I fired another round into the air to scare him off, but he still didn't move an inch. Then he actually started walking towards me with his arms slightly out, as if telling me to lower my weapon. I aimed my gun at him again, screaming for him to go away. That's when I realized I was surrounded by people dressed in dark clothing, at least 6 or 7 others that I could see. Who knows how many more there were. The man stopped approaching as I stepped backward. They all stood in silence for a moment. I cannot explain the fear I was experiencing. I thought I was about to be killed. That was when they all started chanting something. I couldn't understand it. It sounded like a different language, almost like a song. I started wondering if they were about to perform some kind of sick ritual on me. I took the opportunity to run as fast as I could down a few rows of corn. Out of breath, I stopped and fired about 6 rounds in their direction. I heard a bunch of footsteps and rustling crops going the opposite way. I finally scared them off. I ran back towards the farmhouse, stopped, and saw something on the ground that has stuck with me. A cow head sitting in the middle of a circle of candles. I wanted to vomit. As soon as I got back to the farmhouse, I grabbed the house phone and called the police. I told the operator everything to the best of my ability. She said an officer would be there soon. After I got off the phone, I called my parents explaining the situation and asked them to come pick me up. My dad said he'd be there in an hour. I sat upstairs in my grandpa's room, shaking and crying, waiting for what felt like an eternity until I finally heard a police car outside. I ran out to the officer and never felt happier in my life. I told everything to the officer. He searched the barn and a bit of the cornfield and found the cow head. He called up a search team. As this was now an active crime scene, when my parents arrived, I, along with the first officer, had a talk with them about everything that happened. Thankfully, my grandparents took this very seriously and installed a high-tech security camera system all over the farm. Who knows what kind of group that was, but clearly they were doing some kind of animal sacrifice ritual. I just happened to be the unlucky one home alone on the farm when they chose to do it.